Okay, good to see you all. Uh, Gompa Rapsel Stallworths. Snehi has returned after her exciting
Found
trips
it.
to Asia, to India and Asia and Singapore and other places. Snehi, everything you didn't come down with any influenza or okay, that's excellent. Okay, Nadine's here. Uh, so let's begin with the prayers to try to set a motivation. When you do them by yourself, I've mentioned many times, try to go through them slowly and really develop when we say Sangye Churang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I'm enlightened. Um, Try to actually develop that thought by remembering the causes, the suffering of the lower realms, the suffering of the hell realms, and so forth, the animal realms, and try to develop out of a fear of that and a fear in future lives of not having a human life to take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sognam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Tupasho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Changchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunen Gipe Sognam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drupasho. And by offering this ground anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm. So, in other words, transformed in your own mind with a pure view. Due to my offering this, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. And the requests that we make as a result of, to due to this cause of offering the mandala, we're requesting the primordial Buddhas, all of the Buddhas, to turn the wheel of Dharma. O holy and perfect pure Lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. So if you have a mandala plate, usually what you do is you would turn the plate toward you and let the rice and substances or precious substances fall into the cloth on your lap. If you just have the hand mudra, you would go like this. At other times when you were not requesting blessing, but making an offering, you turn the mandala the other way forward, or your hand mudra also going forward like that. Okay, so let's spend a couple of minutes in quiet meditation to try to set our motivation more in a meditative way, in addition to the words. So relaxing your body. Take a last sip of water here. Relax your mind. Pay attention to your breathing. And once you've noticed it, hold it with mindfulness. And try to eliminate your multitasking. That is, your part of your mind thinking of other things. Augment this with a mental factor of introspection or mental spy, if you want to call it that, that's watching whether you are keeping the respiration within your memory, within your mindfulness. You can scan the five senses. Remind yourself, I'm not going to be paying attention to the eye consciousness, even though there may be some light coming in and you, or some shadows passing by you, or to sounds. I'm not going to pay attention to that, or to odors or tastes. The body consciousness, however, is that which is actually registering at first your is how we're knowing the respiration at first. Not through its grosser forms of watching the belly rise and fall or the diaphragm rise and fall, but through, maybe just the feeling within the nostrils of the air coming in and going out. You may also notice the difference in temperature. When you're breathing in, the nostrils experience slightly cooler air. And when you're breathing out, having been warmed by just some proximity to your lungs and throat and so forth, nostrils slightly warmer. Then, assuming we've had a little success in that, if you do it by yourself at leisure, take time to try to have a continuity of, say, 21 respirations when you've not been distracted at all. But here, now turn your attention to the mental consciousness rather than the respiration, recognizing it through recognizing its contents, letting go of its contents and just focusing on the subjective mind of clear light, conventional clear light nature of the mind. You have to infer this clear light nature by noticing that the subjects, that the objects of mental consciousness, the thoughts, the afflictions or virtual states of mind, memories, images, conversations, all that arise without resistance from the mind offering, mental consciousness offering no resistance to their emergence and no resistance to their absorbing back into the consciousness once you no longer are paying attention to them. So remember, you don't have to be unhappy. Just don't pay attention to that. That will begin to subside. Then later, when you're in a calm state, you can deal with whatever was causing you to be unhappy. See if you can recall a blissful response to this clear light nature of the mind, our conventional Buddha nature, developmental Buddha nature. It means we can get better. There's nothing we're missing. We can get rid of our faults, definitely. There's no one who's forever bad and stupid and inferior and ugly and whatever. Unloved. If we want to be loved, we can create the cause of that by giving love to others. So this mimics the tantric realization of bliss and void. Here we're not talking about emptiness, but just the lack of any obstructive contact of the mind, this Buddha nature, conjoined with some blissful response to that. The fact that we can recognize this and feel this joy now is due to this auspicious moment of having a life of leisure and endowment, which is so rare. That the Buddha praised as having great significance, even though it's impermanent and fleeting in every instant, very difficult to create the causes of. When we do have it, it has the great significance of being the basis upon which we can achieve liberation from cyclic existence, finish this whole racetrack in some cyclic existence that we've been circling in since beginningless time, or more nobly, we can work to achieve enlightenment rather than just personal liberation of nirvana, having taken observing the suffering of mother sentient beings, remembering our equality with them, feeling mercy, compassion for them, remembering their kindness and having been our mother numberless times to this tapestry of time when our strands, our mind streams have come together in the same world system at the same time in some close relationship, sometimes as friends, sometimes as enemy, sometimes as stranger. But recalling our own plight within cyclic existence and understanding that all mother sentient beings are experiencing the same plight, not wanting suffering, but often creating the causes for it, not being satisfied with the happiness we have, but often destroying the causes of our happiness and wanting to have more. Think how wonderful it would be if I could relieve them of their suffering in a fundamental way. Maybe first by relieving their temporal suffering so that they become a suitable vessel for the teachings and become a disciple. Later, by actually imbuing them with the nectar of Dharma to lead them out of their present state, whether it be the hell realms, the animal realms, the Pareto realms, the God realms, or human realms, lead them over however many lives it may take into the state of enlightenment. To do that, we need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. Merit, we have some understanding of how to create karma, but not full understanding how to create uncontaminated karma. And the collection of wisdom, we're more or less at the beginning bereft of that knowledge unless we've studied emptiness in previous lives. The texts by Lama Tsong Khapa that we're studying, a commentary to Chandrakirti's Entering into the Middle Way, or supplement to the Middle Way, which is a commentary itself to Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom, which itself is explaining the Buddha's Prajna Paramita Sutras. They all explain these two collections, how to accumulate them. So think, I'm going to participate in the class this morning, this afternoon, this evening. In order to achieve enlightenment, by listening to the teachings, contemplating, meditating on them, trying to accumulate the two collections, for the sake of achieving enlightenment, so that I can effortlessly, spontaneously, without fault, lead sentient beings out of suffering into that very same state. I'm going to participate, listen to the class in order to become a Buddha to benefit all mother sentient beings. Yeah. So with that benign state of mind, sort of like the beginning of the Lama Chopa Puja, where it says Rabkar Gesen Chempon Nangnine, out of the great state of pure, pristine mind. So thinking of all sentient beings, uh, in a positive light, rather than as enemies or irritations or political opponents or whatever. Okay, so before we begin, anyone have any questions uh, you'd like addressed? No? Jeremy's also here from Australia, I see. Okay. So just a reminder, tomorrow is the 25th of the Tibetan month, and it's also Lama Tsong Khapa's special day, the day of the Tibetan calendar in which he passed away into parinirvana. So it's considered a very important day. Who knows the Tibetan name of that day? Do you know, Mikhail, or Paul? What was it called? Ganden
I honestly forget. Sorry.
Namchu, I think, right?
No, something like that, right?
Namchu. So, so we will do for Shantideva Center. We'll do the Guru Puja starting tomorrow afternoon, and so I've mentioned the Guru Puja many times. Guru Puja is actually the intention written by the first Panchen Lama, or you can call the fourth Panchen Lama. We've talked about that various times. The uh, the Guru Puja, the actual idea is that you visualize, imagine your guru in the aspect of Lama Tsongkhapa in the field of assembled gurus, and perform the seven limb puja elaborately through all of these different stages, many types of prostrations and then elaborate offerings, including the offering of sok, confession, rejoicing, requesting the Buddha to turn the wheel of Dharma and to remain until the end of samsara, and then dedicating the merits. And then on the basis of those offerings, requesting the blessings of our gurus to make the realization of the path by going through the stages of the path at the end of the puja. So that's going to be tomorrow. So if you have a chance to attend that, it would be, I think, very beneficial. Also, I just mention if you see some new spots, I went to the dermatologist and they froze off some little growths, nothing cancerous, some precancerous. Usually when you're over 60, you're supposed to have a body scan, suggested to have a body scan at least once a year to see if you've got any little critters growing. So that's what my new spots are. When I scratched one of them in the presence of the dermatologist, he said, "Oh, yeah, you just took 1 week off the healing of that, so I have to be careful not to scratch this." Okay, so enough of that. So we are now at a point in the text called a summary that concludes the refutation, which in Thupten Jinpa's text is page 335, and in the FPMT text 189. I think. Is that right? Yeah. Um, and for Diana and others who might have just the what do you call it? The electronic edition, a summary that concludes the refutation. If you search for that, you'll come into this section just before verse 671, the last two lines of that. So just to reiterate what we were talking about before. I say the actual outline name was quite a few pages back there. How such a refutation is not inconsistent with the meditation on foulness, Tipton translated, or repulsiveness. And in that context, we talked about how this perception by humans of water in the human realm is perceived by pretas who are here, because they can come to the human realm, as perceived as pus and blood. But the God realm, say the devas of the desire realm who can perceive the human realm, they perceive it as nectar, the same kind of nectar that they find in their God realm. And we went through the explanation. And last Monday, we had a quite good discussion about the various explanations of that, how that, so in one, just sort of just a general summary of that, especially for Snehi, who kind of missed that. So how do you understand that to happen, Snehi? What do you think? The pretas see pus and blood. They have, is their consciousness a wrong consciousness? It's not a direct perceiver. They don't actually perceive pus and blood.
I think for them, what they perceive and interpret is correct for them.
Right. So are they perceiving the same thing that humans perceive as water?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I think you have a good understanding. Yeah. So we talked about that as though in the human realm, that which we call water, one part of the dependent arising that creates that appearance, depending on humans' karma. For the pretas who have different karma, they can't perceive the water that we perceive, that part of the dependent arising that appears as water for us. But there's another part of that dependent arising that actually appears to them as pus and blood, and they do have a correct, valid perception of that, as the gods also have a correct, valid perception of the nectar and so forth. Okay, so now a summary that concludes the refutation. So this is the verse here is, in brief, this is the point. Just as there is no cognizable object, understand that there is no cognizing mind either, or either, okay? So, as Venerable Joan translated in the FPMT translation, in brief, understand the meaning that just, quote, just as objects of knowledge do not exist, likewise, awareness also does not exist. And in this context, when Geshe Zopa was teaching on July 23rd, 2003, in the afternoon, he reminded us that this is, well, we haven't come to this verse yet. He said this is similar to the verse 696 in our Madhyamaka. So I'm going to read this first, and then we can take a look at 696. So, and when you do, you should be able, those with a written text, you should be able to, by paging through, you should be able to find the page number. It says, the Buddhists taught, quote, when objects of knowledge do not exist, the elimination of consciousness is easily acquired. That means the refutation of consciousness is easily acquired. So let me see. If I go to 696 here on my electronic edition, I can find that easily. There we go. It's in the section How to Read the Sutras. So this says, this is in a section called, this is quite a bit in the future, verse 96, because we're at what, verse 71 or something like that now. So this outline at that point says, showing through reason how such a statement is provisional. To elucidate through reasoning how the statement about mind only is provisional, that means is not definitive, right? When we talk about the definitive meaning of the sutras and the what's the other term that's used for provisional? What do we
Interpretable.
interpretable, right? So the various teachings of the Buddha, from the Prasangika point of view, those which are actual, not provisional, but definitive, are the statements about emptiness, and all other statements about karma and everything else that may be true are only interpretable or provisional, having to understand that they are always qualified by being non-inherently existent. So the verse in question there says, once cognizable objects are shown to be no more, this is Thupten Jinpa's translation, then negation of cognition is easily obtained, the Buddhas said. Thus, if there is no object, cognition is easily negated as a consequence. So the Buddhas first negated the objects of cognition. So this is this is explaining why the Buddha taught, say for instance, in the some of the lower schools, or when we're leading up to the Prasangika view and trying to have a correct understanding, you first negate the existence of the objects of cognition, outer phenomena, and as a result of that, you can easily understand how the consciousness itself that perceives those objects, because those objects are not inherently existent, the consciousness that perceives them is also not inherently existent. And as I've mentioned many times, it's said that once you understand the consciousness is empty of inherent existence, realizations, higher realizations are easily obtained. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that Geshe-la pointed out at that point that is similar to that verse. So let's see here where we get back to where we are. Okay. Okay. Okay, so in brief, this is the point. Just as there is no cognizable object, understand that there is no cognizing mind either. Verse 671, C and D. So Jinpa's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa starts, to summarize the points explained extensively above. So previously, we refuted that the consciousness is inherently existent, that the Chittamatra would like to hold to. We've refuted that there's no external world, that the Chittamatrans would like to say that there's no external world, that there's all the nature of the mind. That was explained above. So to summarize that, in brief, this is the point. Just as there is, and then he has in brackets, for you Chittamatra, no intrinsically real cognizable object, likewise understand that there is no cognizing mind through its essential nature either, bearing the appearance of such objects. Is that right? Is his parenthetical or bracketed comment there for you, Chittamatra? Is that correct? Mikhail, what do you think? Is that right?
Mm, yeah. There is no, I mean, neither the,
Doesn't Chittamatra say that there is an intrinsically real cognizable object?
oh, no, 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 no. The Chandrakirti's point that neither object of knowledge nor consciousness are real.
Right. But this sentence, the way that Jimpa has added a bracket there, where it says, just as there is, say, let's say
Oh,
just let's say if we said, just as there is for us prasangika, no
yeah, I
intrinsically
see.
real cognizable object, likewise understand that there is no cognizing mind arisen through its essential nature, either bearing the appearance of such objects.
Oh, yeah, but yeah, the Chittamatra would want to say that there is no external object of knowledge.
But they would say that here is not talking about external objects of knowledge, just talking about the inherent nature of the mind. Just
Yeah,
as
but
there
I'm
is,
trying to understand the bracket Chittamatra with what is following, but
yeah. So I'm
yeah.
asking, but what do you think, Paul? Did he put that in there incorrectly? Should that be prasangika?
Um, I'm wondering, right? Because if you take the object to refer to an external object, right? Then Chittamatra would say there's no real cognizable external object, but there is a real intrinsically existent consciousness, right? Because that's what the other powered natures are. Those are their consciousnesses that are right, that are subject object.
Right. So it doesn't say external here. It
Right.
just says there's no intrinsically real, the way he's translated. Let's look
Sure.
at the FPMT translation that says the meaning in brief of the previous extensive explanation is as follows. By saying that one should understand and cherish the meaning that just as objects of knowledge do not inherently exist, this is not talking about exist as um, external objects. They say just as objects of knowledge do not inherently exist, likewise the awareness that has the aspect of those objects of knowledge are not are also not produced by way of their own nature. By that, Chandrakirti indicates that there is no difference between the objects of knowledge of consciousness in terms of their existing or not existing inherently. So it's not talking about external objects here. So I'm questioning whether Jimpa's bracketed thing there for Chittamatrans is correct. What do you think? Who's anyone following what we're saying here?
Yeah, I think you're right, Venerable George. Because what does the Tibetans say? It says Sheja Rangshingi Drupa Meba, just as there are no cognizable objects established by way of their own character.
Right.
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 So Jimba's omitted that in his translation. Oh no, I'm sorry. Right.
He seems to admit it. He's saying real or something like that.
Intrinsically real, yeah.
Richard, I saw a slight when I asked understanding it was
I'm not sure I understand what the point of dispute is about the statement. Can you just why do you think that's not the case? Because don't the Chittamatras believe that there is no intrinsically real cognizable object? And isn't he saying then, in addition to that, we Prasankikas likewise understand that there is no cognizing mind arisen through its essential nature? That's how I'm reading it.
Yeah. So do the Chittamatrans say that there are no intrinsically real, let's say inherently real objects of knowledge? What for Chittamatra, the objects of knowledge, are they inherently existent or are they not inherently existent?
They're not inherently existent.
No,
Yeah.
for Chittamatra, they are inherently existent.
The objects of knowledge are, as opposed to. Okay, all right. I'm sorry. Then I misunderstood.
No, it's something we have to sort of go back and forth because it's always all of these tenets are hard to keep in mind. It's like juggling. Yeah. So, and the Tibetan sort of, as Paul is pointing out, it says Rangshingi Drupa Mepa. Rangshingi Drupa Mepa. So that usually we say that there is no Jitoa, just as there is no inherently existent objects of knowledge and so forth. So let me read at this point what Geshe Zopa said again on that July 23rd, 2003. So he had mentioned about the verse that this is similar to that we just read from verse 696. The Buddhists taught when objects of knowledge do not exist, the elimination of consciousness is easily acquired. So Geshe said, just as the external objects do not inherently exist, in the same way, the subject consciousness, the subject's consciousnesses also do not inherently exist. So the various, just in the same way that the objects of knowledge do not inherently exist, the consciousnesses that perceive them do not exist. So this is a theme that's going to be coming out here that's not so clear in the translations of Lama Tsongkhapa's text, but is important that there is a correspondence between the two. If one exists, the other would exist. When you talk about subject and object, if the object exists, there will be a subject, say conventionally. If you talk about ultimate truth, if the objects do not inherently exist, the subjects of those do not inherently exist.
Venerable George, could you reread what Geshe Sopa said?
I'm going to read it again and continue. There's a little longer paragraph. Just as the external object does not inherently exist, in the same way the subject consciousness also does not inherently exist. If the subject is inherently existing, that means the mind, right? That's perceiving these things. If the subject mind is inherently existing, then the object also would be inherently existent, provisional tense sort of, or should be inherently existent. So therefore, he said this famous phrase that comes in the Tibetan, not explicitly here, but in other places, Yona Yonam. What does that mean? Yona Yonam. Yo means existence. Na means if. So Yona means if exists, not Yoda. I'm not talking about the Star Wars. Yeah. Yona, Yonam. What's Nyam means equal. So Geshe says, so therefore Yona, Yonam, equal to exist. Both equally should be. They should be the same. Also, Mena, Menyam. So if one does not exist, the other should be equally not existent. Whether you're talking about subject or object. If you're saying the subject does not exist, then the object would not exist. If the object does not exist, the subject does not exist. That's why it's not talking about subject. Object is saying yo and me, existent and non-existent. Menam menam. If one is not existent, both equally are not existent. The Prasangika tries to prove that here. That is the brief meaning, Geshe said. So that doesn't come across so clearly in the translations. Well, Snehi, what do you think?
Well, George, I wanted to clarify because I got confused when you and Richard were talking about that sentence. So for I always thought that for Chittamatra, when they are looking at external objects, that they do not consider those to be intrinsically or real. those objects are an appearance to the mind based on the ripening of, an imprint.
Right. So this is the slight difference. They would say that they are empty of existing the way that they appear, but those objects do exist. And not only do they exist inherently.
You mean for Chittamatra, those objects
Yeah.
exist inherently?
Yeah, so the dependent nature. So when we talk about the Chittamatra introduces something called the three natures, which is also accepted, and elaborated on in the Svatantrika and in the Prasangika Madhyamaka. The three natures, what are they? The dependent nature, the imputed nature, and the perfect nature.
Perfect nature.
Like that. So the dependent nature would be the dependent nature exists. That means the objects of knowledge and so forth. But it is empty of the imputed nature that our minds impute upon it. The imputed nature for Chittamatra is that the outer objects are different than the subject mind. That's the imputed nature that they're empty of. But they themselves, they inherently exist. So their emptiness is not meaning an emptiness of inherent existence, because they accept them to be inherently existent. Their emptiness is the emptiness of them being external objects. They're refuting that appearance of externality.
Venerable George?
So if
I was going
so
to
if
say,
I,
oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I think I was going to explain. I think Sine is speaking about something else, right?
no, so just to use what you were saying just now, Venerable George. So for Chittamatra, when an appearance of an apple appears to their mind, they will say it is empty of existing separately by its own nature from consciousness.
I don't
But
think they say by its own nature. They say it's empty of being an external object the way that it appears.
okay, so they will say that, but then they will also say that apple has intrinsic existence.
Yes, that it
That's
inherently.
the part I was confused by.
Yeah.
So they would say both those things. The apple has intrinsic existence, but it doesn't exist in the way it appears to me, the way you described it
as being external.
as being external. Okay.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So I just want to clarify this because I've always been under the impression that nothing existed at all for the Chittamatrans except for mind, and that there were no external objects that existed, period. Am I mistaken in that?
That has to be qualified. There are no external objects existing the way that they appear as being. There are no objects that exist as the way that they appear as being external, but those objects, those dependent arisings, still inherently exist. That dependent nature. So the dependent nature of the three natures, the dependent nature, let's say the external objects, they inherently exist. What they are actually empty of, there are real things there, not real in the sense of truly existent, but inherently existent. What they are empty of is the imputed nature that our mind thinks about them as being external objects. They're empty of being that externality. Sean, yeah.
But didn't earlier in the text, when they were talking about the meditator meditating on skeletons, weren't they trying to say that those objects were not inherently existing?
They were saying that they didn't exist at all, right? Because other people who turned their attention there wouldn't see those skeletons that the meditator saw. So that was that's deep, the deep grass again. Yeah, that's good. Paul, what do you think?
Well, I guess the thing that was making me question this is the Tibetan, right? That says Sheja Rangshinki Drupa Meva, right? That it's not established by way of its own character. And I seem to remember that there's
Yeah, so usually we would say that's not like Senigi Drupa.
Right.
It's saying Rangshingi Drupa, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so usually we translate that as not inherently existent rather than by its own characteristics. But anyway, go on.
No, well, I was just going to say, because my understanding was with the imputational nature that you can talk about that emptiness in two ways. You can say that it's empty of duality of subject and object, but you could also say that it's empty in terms of being the referent of names and terms, names and concepts, right? So it was always that thing about there being two
Subtle
ways
lay,
of framing the object of negation in Chittamatra.
right.
So that's why I was thinking that maybe that's why Thupten Jimbo was bracketing in Chittamatra, because he was reading it as saying, oh, you claim imputational natures are not established by way of their own character as reference of terms, but then you still want the consciousness apprehending them to be inherently existent.
Okay, that's a good reading of that. Okay.
So that's why I was wondering if that's why he was taking it that way, because he wasn't, because I mean, you're taking it as in a single moment of consciousness ripens into a dualistic subject and object, right? Where we would say that both are inherently existent. Whereas if you're reading it as the first one not being the dualistic appearance, but rather the imputational nature being lacking establishment by way of its own character, but the consciousness being established by way of its own character, in other words, inherently existent, then it would almost be like, then you could see why he would take it as saying Chittamatra, oh, you guys say the object doesn't exist, but you say the consciousness does.
Okay, we'll have to go about that over the vacation. Think about that. Let's go a little bit further. So in Jimpa's translation further, how are we doing? Suvansh, are you okay? You look a little bit like the deer with the headlights coming at you. Okay. Okay. So here, the next section says, here, Chandrakirti demonstrates that when it comes to their lack of intrinsic existence, we would say inherent existence, there can be no difference between the cognizing mind and its object of cognition. In light of this, statements such as, quote, since there is no floating hair, there is no cognition that perceives it. So what's that talking about? Remember when we talked about the example that Chittamatra uses about the falling hair, seeing falling hairs. If someone has floaters, it looks like there's hairs falling into their tukpa, their soup or their porridge or their meal. They call the waiter over and say, get this away from me. There's got worms falling in or hairs falling in. And the waiter who doesn't have that fault of eye, they say that there are no hairs there. So that's the sense that since there is no floating hair, since there are no floating hairs, there is no cognition that perceives it. And so in light of that, statements such as that, and another statement, since there is no apprehended object of the mind that perceives magically manifested horses and elephants, the mind that apprehends such things does not exist either. You know, because there are no actual elephants and horses or beautiful people that the magician has created. Those are just illusions. Therefore, the mind that perceives them does not exist. That doesn't make it. The mind still is there. The mind that perceives those things, that the mind of the person with floaters still exists. So it says here, those in light of that, statements such as those cannot be the position of the master Chandrakirti at all. How are we doing? Making sense a little bit? Oh, I see some blank stares.
So the two statements here are not correct because they are not referring to the same level of error, right? right?
Well, they're saying that a
I mean,
statement, because there's no floating hair, there is no cognition that perceives it.
yeah, that's incorrect because that's not referring to absence of inherent existence.
Right. That's just an absolute attempt at trying to negate that. Let me just read a little bit more here. So the first part of that statement where it says, here Chandrakirti demonstrates that when it comes to their lack of intrinsic existence, there can be no difference between the cognizing mind and its object of cognition. So in that context, again, yeah, no, I've read that, what Geshe Zopa said for that. So this where it says, starting with since there is no floating hair, there is no cognition that perceives it, and since there is no apprehended object of the mind that perceives magically manifested horses and elephants, the mind that apprehends such things does not exist either. Those kind of statements are out and out refutations that such a mind exists at all. That can't be the position of the Master Chandrakirti at all. What he's talking about is that there's no inherent existence. So here in continuing, it says, in the hymn to the world transcendent. That's Jimpa's translation of Jikten Le Depe Toba. Toba usually I don't usually translate Toba as hymn. Who knows some Tibetan? What do we usually, Mikhail, how do you translate Toba?
Praise?
Praise, right? Is it praise to was it Jikten Le Depe? Praise to the supramundane would be one way of translating that. So that's one of the famous praises of Nagarjuna, right? He wrote several texts that were praises. And the way that Jimpa's translated that here, without being known, it's not an object of knowledge. So unless something is known by a consciousness, you can't posit it as being an object of knowledge. And without that, the verse continues, there is no consciousness either. So without an object of knowledge, there's no inherently existent consciousness. Therefore, the knower and the known possess no intrinsic reality, you've taught. Yeah, yeah. Kyoki Tsong, yeah, you Buddha have taught this. Yeah. So Krishnan Littner, who is this famous, what is Krishnan, wasn't that Littner Danish or what is he?
I think he was Danish. Yeah.
Yeah. Is he still, I thought he was still alive. You said he was.
Yeah. I think he's still alive, last I heard.
So he wrote a lot on translating a lot of Nagarjuna's smaller texts. And there's one text that he had for a long time, Nagarjuniana, so like all about Nagarjuna. And subsequent re-editings of that have come with talking about republishing them in other volumes that Ron and I find so frustrating when you have the same volume coming out with different titles, sometimes slightly edited. So in his translation of this is verse 132 in the praise to the supramundane, or as however Jimpa translated it. So his translation, Littner's translation is, there is no object of knowledge unless it is being known. But the knowing consciousness does not exist without the object. Thus, you Buddha, have said that the knowledge and the object of knowledge do not exist by own being, or, do not exist inherently. Rangshingi meba. Rangshingi mebar kyoki sung. Okay, so that's one quotation. And then a second quotation that's meant to verify what we've just been talking about, that there's a equality between, they say yona yonam, that if one exists, if the object exists, the subject exists, and so forth. And if there's one does not exist, the other does not exist. They are dependent upon one another. Subject and object don't exist inherently. They're only posited in terms of the other. Like that mountain over there and this mountain that I'm on here, for me, they seem, like this mountain and that mountain seem like inherent. But if you stand on that mountain is considered this mountain. And the mountain I'm standing on now is considered that mountain. So they're only posited in relation to one another. Or, tall and short are only posited in relation to one another. They don't inherently exist. There's nothing inherently short. It's only in relation to something which is taller than it that it's called short, and so forth. So the second quotation here is now from another text, maybe the same text that we had encountered earlier. But anyway, let me read what it says here. Jimpa's translation is that consciousness is like an illusion. This the sun-like friend has taught. Its object, too, is similar. Certainly, it resembles an illusion. A little bit awkward to say like that. So Louis de Vallée-Poussin, did I pronounce that right, Michael? French?
La Vallée-Poussin, oui.
La Vallée-Poussin.
And just to say, Geshe Gelek said for him it's the same text.
Which is the same text? Oh,
the
it is.
Second quote.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Louis Vallée-Poussin said it is also the Samyukta Nikaya, which we had encountered earlier. Remember, there was something like Zukni Bua Chopada. So, form is like a bubble. Sarwa Chui Chuburda. Feeling is like, form is like what? Uwa Chobada. I can't remember what that was. It was a form is something that's kind of like insubstantial. Feelings are like bubbles. Discriminations are like illusions, and so forth. You may remember that from earlier in the text. It came up, and that was quoted. It was quoted in relationship to saying how even in the Hinayana scriptures, there are indications that the Buddha, that they understood the Buddha taught something that things are illusory, sort of like lacking inherent existence. Okay, so this one says, let's see what, I don't have the FPMT translation here. What did FPMT Venerable Jones said? Consciousness being like an illusion was taught by the solar kinsman. Likewise, also, its observed objects are definitely likened to illusory things. Okay, so those are two different quotations from different places. And so who is the solar kinsman or the sun-like friend? Does anyone remember? KT, do you remember when we talked about that before? No?
I thought it was the Buddha, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, do you remember why he's called that?
Oh, I don't remember why.
It's just one of the many epithets. So there,
Oh,
sometimes at the beginning of the teachings, when the Dalai Lama gives, we say, Tomba Chomdende Dejin Shepa Da Chomba Yang Dak Sope Sange Brikpa Dang Shapshu Dempa. So we go through various epithets of the Buddha. You were the Arhat, the fully enlightened one, the teacher of the world, of gods and man, and so forth and so on. So this is another epithet of the Buddha that has its own story that if you're interested, you can go back and check your notes when that came up before, why he's called a solar kinsman or the sun-like friend. Okay, so in commentary now to these two verses that are being quoted, one is being quoted from the praise to the supramundane or the hymn to the world transcendent, and one is from this Hinayana scripture. So as stated in these lines, if something cannot be said to be known by a cognition, if something is not known by a cognition, it cannot be characterized as an object of knowledge. That's a nice way to say if something cannot be said to be known by a cognition. So, there's some tenets that say because emptiness cannot be known, it's not an object of knowledge. Do you remember when we talked about that? So as stated in these lines, if something cannot be said to be known by a cognition, it cannot be characterized as an object of knowledge. This is a Prasangika position. Similarly, if a cognizing mind cannot be shown to know some kind of object, it cannot be characterized even as a form of cognition. So if they're like, for instance, we do talk about the mind at the time, the first moment of mind at the time of birth and various other instances when you're unconscious and so forth. If they are not knowing an object, they are not a fully qualified consciousness. So it's saying something similar here. Similarly, if a cognizing mind cannot be shown to know some kind of object, it cannot be characterized even as a form of cognition. Without the cognized, the object, there could be no consciousness. You have to have, they are dependent upon one another. They are posited in relation to one another. Given that cognition and the cognized are defined mutually, Nagarjuna states that you, the Buddha, taught that both the cognizing mind and the object that's being known, they both lack intrinsic existence. They both lack inherent existence. This indicates that the position of the noble Nagarjuna is to not differentiate between these two, cognition and cognized, on either level of the two truths when it comes to their existence or non-existence. Whoa. So there's a lot to unpack there. Again, this is one of those places where you could dive into this in many different ways. Let me read. Let me read first what Venerable Joan translated here. As stated in these lines, if something cannot be said to be shown, if something cannot be said to be known by a consciousness, it cannot be posited as an object of knowledge. So the word jokpa is in the Tibetan means you can't posit it. You can't, for instance, positing and imputing sort of mean the same thing. You can't actually state that something is an object of knowledge unless it is being cognized. It's stated in these lines, if something cannot be said to be known by a consciousness, it cannot be posited as an object of knowledge. If, quote, this knows such an object, unquote, is not posited, also consciousness cannot be posited. Therefore, without objects of knowledge, consciousnesses also do not exist. This is Venerable Jones' translation. Consciousness and an object of knowledge are posited. How does Jimpa translate all the time? Defined mutually. He's using a slightly different term than usually we would translate to, sort of making it more easily understandable in the vernacular. Let me read that again. Consciousness and an object of knowledge are posited in relation to one another, due to which the Arya, Nagarjuna taught, quote, both of them were indicated by you, Buddha, to not exist inherently, unquote. Therefore, it is the position of the Arya, meaning Arya Nagarjuna, to not differentiate between these two, consciousness and object, on either level of the two truths when it comes to their existence or non-existence. I had printed it wrong. It should be or non-existence. Okay. Suvash, what do you think?
Venerable George, what I'd say, I mean, in reading this section, what I feel is that the Prasangikas have a theory of perception. Well, we know, right? We know that Prasangikas have a theory of perception, which is not the same as the theory of perception of the Chitta Mantra, right? Now, in this section, what's happening is that the Prasangikas say that the perception and the percept are mutually dependent, and they have no intrinsic, and therefore they have no intrinsic reality. But that is because of their theory of perception. Okay.
Yeah.
If I now turn and look at the Chitta Mantra and look at their theory of perception, okay, in their theory of perception, because the seed gives rise to both the cognizing mind and the perception, and that they are both mind and that they are both intrinsically inherently existent. What I feel is that this 671, right? This explains the Prasangika position, but it does not necessarily refute the Chitta Mantra position.
I think it does. But anyway, let's go on. Let me just read a little bit here what Geshe Zopa said about this. Okay, about these two things. No, so Luis is going to remind me it's time to take a break. So I'm just going to read this first. So Geshe said again on July 23rd in 2003 in the morning, praising to the Buddha. So that's the praise to the supramundane. So it's actually, the whole praise is quite long that Nagarjuna wrote, that we had that one verse, I think verse 132 or whatever. This is actually praise to the Buddha. You show both of them are not inherently existing. So that means what are the both of them? That means the subject and object, right? So that means saying that way. So therefore, Arya Nagarjuna's real thought, his actual belief, is that you show both of them are not inherently existing. So Arya Nagarjuna's real thought or belief is both of them, and then Geshe said in Tibetan, Denni Gangduyang. Den means, Dempa means truth. Then Yi means the two truths, Kangyayang, and either of the two truths, conventionally, relatively, the relative truth, conventional truth, and ultimate truth, existing both ways, conventionally, relative way, the relative sense, both of them equally exist. So in the conventional level, the consciousness that perceives objects and the objects that it perceives, they both conventionally exist, or they are truths for a jerk, right? But ultimately, they both do not exist inherently, right? If you talk about the ultimate sense, inherently both of them do not exist. So that is any of those two truths, either of those two truths, there is no distinction that one exists and one does not exist. Remember we said this, yona, yonam, mena, menam. So if one exists, the other exists. If one does not exist, the other does not exist. So there's no distinction that one exists and one does not exist. You can't have that. You cannot say both. You cannot say it either in the conventional sense or in the ultimate sense. You cannot say that one is. Both of them are equal. That is the same thing. This kind of distinction is Nagarjuna's real teaching, his real intention. Okay, making sense? Okay.
So Venerable George, here they are using scripture as to support to make his case. The Prasangika is using scripture, correct?
Yeah.
And not necessarily logic. It's just scripture.
Yeah. What's wrong with that? That's good. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm just going to read this next verse, and then we're going to take a break. So this section ends with a verse from the Commentary on Awakening Mind. So this is the what do we say? The Commentary on Bodhicitta. Who composed that text? Does anyone know? Do you know, Nadine?
Bodhicitta Vivarana.
Yeah.
It's Arya Nagarjuna.
Yeah, Nagarjuna also.
Thank you.
Arya Nagarjuna. That's good. Nice to add a title to that. So this is one of his other famous texts. The cognizer, this is Jimpa's translation. The cognizer perceives the cognizable. So the consciousness perceives that which is to be known. Without the cognizable, there is no cognition. So, how did Venerable June translate that? The cognizable, or no, this is from another text maybe. The cognizable, the jnana, is known by the cognizant. Without the cognizable, no cognition is possible. So why not accept the subject and why not accept the object and subject do not exist per se? Okay, so that the final commentary to this section says, this passage is similar to the citation from the hymn above. So this is another text of Nagarjuna's. The other text was his praise to the supramundane or hymn to the supramundane. We read that quotation. This is another quotation of Nagarjuna from another text called the Commentary on Bodhicitta. So he says, this passage is similar to the citation from the hymn or praise above. So it also represents an authoritative source for the parity, the equality between external reality and consciousness when it comes to their existence or non-existence. Okay, I'll let you chew on that a little while we take a little break. Okay, we had a little good discussion during break. We don't record the breaks because sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes there's some spirited questions and answers. Snehi, you look a little bit concerned. What do you think?
I was just thinking about Nadine's question to you about clear light mind at the time of death. And, so one thing is the appearance of a clear light mind, which everybody experiences. But then the second thing is at that time to use that mind to understand that it is empty of inherent existence.
Right. So from the very beginning, during the death evolution, during the practice of highest yoga tantra, say, for instance, once the airs have begun to absorb, you have what's called what's it called? the first one.
White appearance?
Pardon?
White.
The
No,
white
White
appearance?
No, before, at the very beginning, before the smoke, what is it called? A mirage. Mirage-like
Oh.
appearance when the earth element is absorbing. So there's an appearance to the mind of a mirage to the mental consciousness. It's not appearing to the eyes or anything. And at that point, the yogi or yogini, the yogin, let's say yogin, that includes male and female, the yogin would meditate, remind themselves of the meaning of emptiness. This is appearing, but does not exist the way that it appears. I must remember I must remember emptiness at the time of the clear light. Then when the smoke-like appearance appears to the yogin, to their mental consciousness, when the water element is absorbing and the feeling aggregate is absorbed, at that point, there's appearance of smoke as the water element is absorbing into the fire element. And the yogin would remind themselves again, this does not exist the way that it appears as inherently existent. They would meditate on the emptiness of that appearance. I think you're concentrating on what I'm saying, or I'm not sure if you're dozing.
No, I'm listening.
Okay, so they would meditate because they have to have previously, through their practice of sutra, or if they just entered tantra, but they had to understand Nagarjuna's view that phenomena do not exist inherently at all. So this appearance of smoke, although it appears to my mind as being inherently existent, it is not inherently existent. It does not inherently exist. So they'd meditate on emptiness for a while as they could during that, because it's not instantaneous that there's a smoke-like appearance. It might take long period of time, many minutes, maybe hours. And as a result of that, they would think, gosh, I must remember this meaning at the time of the clear light of death, because at that time, there's no longer discriminating mind, conceptualizing mind, thinking this is this is that. You just have to remember the meaning. So then in the firefly-like vision, same thing. This appearance does not exist the way it appears. It's empty of inherent existence. I must remember this meaning of emptiness at the time of clear light. Same with the black near attainment, until you fall into that swoon when the mind becomes completely black, called the black near attainment. Near to the attainment of the mother clear light. Then when the mother clear light appears, by the force of your aspiration before, I must remember the meaning of emptiness at the time of clear light. By the force of that, superimposed upon that vacuity, that all empty, you would cognize the sun clear light, S-O-N, the child's clear light, which is the meaning of emptiness. So the yogin who has been able to graft that understanding, that memory of the meaning of emptiness to that clear light mind, which is a direct perception, they can actually realize emptiness directly that way. So in the practice of Tantra, that's one way that the yogins can realize emptiness directly, rather than through the process in the Prajnaparamita, say the Bodhisattva yana. How long does it take to have to create a direct perception of emptiness?
Eons?
Again?
Eons?
Yeah, how many
Long
eons?
time.
3.
Countless.
No, that's to achieve enlightenment. So usually what
2.
Either 1 or 2, yeah, I think two countless great eons of collection of merit through the bodhisattva path before you achieve the path of seeing, I think, or maybe one great eon. Anyway, incredible amount of time. Whereas through the practice of Tantra, you can have that direct realization of emptiness in one lifetime if you have followed all of the precepts of Tantra, and you have the prerequisites, you have the karma, and you collect through the practice of highest yoga tantra, you accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom. You have the correct understanding of emptiness, even though you may have realized it conceptually, right? But that's not enough. You have to realize it directly, right, to become an Arya being. So they could realize it directly with that subtle, clear light mind. Does that help a little bit, Snehi?
Oh, yes, very much.
Okay. So let's
you.
go back to our text here. How are we doing? Yeah, good. Okay. Jeremy, you okay? It's getting a little warmer there in Australia.
Yes, getting summer now. We're all
Good.
happy.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. Let's go back here. So we had this quotation from the Nagarjuna's praise to the supramundane, or as Jimpa translates it, hymn to the world transcendent. But world transcendent or supramundane, what it's referring to is Buddha. It's a praise to the Buddha. So you've taught that without being known, it is not an object of knowledge. And without that, there is no consciousness either. Therefore, the knower and the known possess no intrinsic reality. And there was the other quote from one of the Hinayana scriptures that was mentioned earlier. But when I searched through that sutra, the Samnu, what was it called? You want to keep on mispronouncing it. Samyukta Nikaya. I can't find that verse. I can't find it anywhere. So although Poussin said it is from there, if you can find it within any of the translations of that, by Bhikkhu Bodhi or others, that particular quotation that we just got here, let me know. So we went through that, and then we gave this other quotation from the commentary on the awakening mind, or the commentary to Bodhicitta, as Nadine correctly gave the name Bodhicitta. What was it? Vivarana? Vivarana. So the cognizer perceives the cognizable. Without the cognizable, there is no cognition. That's part of a longer quotation that the next two lines say, therefore, why do you not admit that neither object nor subject exists at all? So this is verse 39 in that commentary to Bodhicitta by Nagarjuna. Okay. So that said, this passage is similar to the citation in the hymn above, the praise above. So it also represents an authoritative source for the parity between external reality and consciousness when it comes to their existence or non-existence. So let's see, I'm not sure if I read Geshe Zopa's made some comments here. Let me see. External or outside things are objects of knowledge. Inside refers to the knower, the knowing. The subject exists. If the subject exists in the same way, the outside object that appears to you should also be there. If that object is not true, real, then the knower also cannot be true. So if the object is not inherently existent, the consciousness cannot be inherently existent. So they are both yona yonam. So if one exists, we say there's an equality of existence of the other. If one exists, they should be equally existent. Mena menam, If one does not exist, equally the same thing. Both object and subject this way are the same. So therefore, Madhyamaka system, both of them do not inherently exist. You cannot say that one inherently exists, the other does not inherently exist. So therefore, if you accept that kind of alaya vijnana, the Chittamatra proposes, then these things will happen. When consciousness realizes or understands an object of knowledge, when you realize those, without the object, you cannot have consciousness. If you don't have consciousness, there is no object of consciousness. You know, if you're asleep, when there's no I consciousness, say when you're in meditation or in deep sleep, there's no I consciousness existing, right? The airs that support the winds that support the consciousness have absorbed. So there's no object of I consciousness at that time. So Geshe-la gave this similar kind of thing. Rikcha rikche. What does that mean? Rikcha rikche. Rik meaning consciousness. Rikcha is that which is to be known. Rikche means knower, that which knows. That to be known and the knower, that kind of thing is not acceptable. Mainly here, this verse is the two, the object of knowledge and the inner consciousness, equally existent and non-existent, equal in the same way. If one is accepted, the other should also be accepted. If one is not accepted, then the other should not be accepted. So just before we go to the next section here, just for auspiciousness, so this also, you can also say, this yona yonam, how about conventional truth and ultimate truth? If one exists, the other has to exist, right? If one does not exist, if you don't have a conventional truth, can you have an emptiness? Can you have an ultimate truth of that? No. So that applies also to the topic, not only subject and object, but also to the two truths. How are we doing? Making sense?
I think for me, George, that if it's going to take two countless eons to even have a chance of correctly understanding this, it's hard to get confidence in these teachings.
No, that's that's why the bodhisattvas who follow the sutra path have to have great courage, motivated out of great compassion, right? That's their main motivating factor. So out of even greater compassion, the person who enters into the tantric path and feels, I can't wait that long because sentient beings are suffering now and I'm just lagging behind here. So they think, nyurwa, quickly, in this life itself, I must achieve enlightenment. And they enter into the practice of Tantra, which requires greater commitments. You have to take the tantric vows. You have to take a vow to practice to see your spiritual guide as the Buddha, not just as a representative of the Buddha, as the actual Buddha, and their speech always leading you. You have to search for that qualified guru a long time to make sure that they're reliable. Like, Naropa checked Tilopa and like Marpa checked Naropa and so forth, for a long period of time. Then you can, in one lifetime, you can, even this lifetime, you can have a conceptual realization of emptiness, Sean. Geshe Nawandharge used to say at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, if you don't have a realization of emptiness in this lifetime, it's been wasted. so from his, very strict point of view. So if you have a conceptual realization of emptiness, correct realization of emptiness, then through the practice of Tantra, controlling the airs, bringing the airs into the central channel, in meditation, you can actualize that the clear light state and have a conception, a direct realization of emptiness, or if not, at the time of death, by your practice during this lifetime, you can have a direct realization of emptiness. So that can happen in one lifetime. Whereas in the Bodhisattva, through the Bodhisattva path, to have a direct, you can have a conceptual realization of emptiness even before entering the path. But to have a direct realization of emptiness takes many lifetimes. Okay. Okay, so now we're just gonna sort of open the tap, prime the pump for our first class after Christmas vacation. We have starting after this class, we have a break until what, January 6th? Right? Whatever the Saturday is. Saturday, the 4th. 3rd. Your fingers. Yeah. Okay.
Third.
The 3rd. So just to prime the pump here. So what we'll start then is the next section that Jimpa's title says, Refuting the Proof of Intrinsic Existence of Dependent Nature. Okay, so dependent nature, again, when we talk about these three natures, you give them 3 fingers up here, right? The dependent nature or other powered phenomena is how it often translated. The imputed nature and the perfect nature. Okay, those 3 natures. So here, refuting the proof of intrinsic existence of other powered phenomena or dependent nature. So here, the first outline there says, refuting the proof of intrinsic existence of dependent nature. So this in the Tibetan, all that comes is nipa la shi. So it just says the second has 4. So you have to have a memory. You have to figure out what the second one is referring to. So Geshe Zopa had said he always was very cautious to remind us, where we are in the text. So he said, so this when it says the second means sen sampe luk cheratu kakpa lasum. So the second outline means refuting the Chittamatra system in particular. This has 3. Chiro mepe shepa rangshingi drupa gak. That is 1. That is now done. That was all of that was already done before. Now the second one, Shenwang Rangshingi Drupe Drupche Semagak, refuting the valid proof of inherently existent other powered phenomena or dependent. What Jimpa translates here is dependent nature is what we often have translated before as other powered phenomena. So why are they called dependent nature and other powered phenomena? How can they be understood to mean the same thing? Richard, do you know what we're talking about?
I'm really not sure. I'd rather not hazard a guess.
Okay, that's fair. I don't like to guess either. So other powered phenomena, the sense of that's what the Tibetan is here, Shenwang. So other powered, that means something is dependent on other things. They come into existence in dependence on causes and conditions and so forth. So another way to translate that in sort of just consumer level, say dependent nature. It does the term Shenwang isn't directly translatable as dependent nature, but that's the implication of it. Okay, so this outline has 4 parts. Refuting reflexive awareness as the proof of dependent nature. That's the first. So what does that mean? Reflexive awareness is what we also call self-knower or Rangrik. So from the Chittamatra point of view, they accept the existence of a self-knower. Remember, it wasn't recorded, but in our discussion during the break, we mentioned that a self-knower, or maybe it was just before that, a self-knower means the capacity of any one consciousness, whether it be an eye consciousness, nose, or whatever, or mental consciousness. One consciousness, its main object is something other than itself. It's something other than itself. It's knowing another object. The eye consciousness that's perceiving a rose, the rose is other than the consciousness. Whereas that consciousness itself also has the capacity to know that it is knowing. That's what's called Rangrik. And so those of you who studied our mind and mental factors courses and so forth, you'd be more familiar with that. Because when we talked about direct perceivers, remember we talked about sense direct perceivers, mental direct perceivers, yogic direct perceivers, which most of the schools agree, and also self-knowing direct perceivers. Whereas the Prasangika would not accept, and several of the tenets do not accept self-knowing direct perceivers. They say that a consciousness cannot know itself in the same way that the tip of my finger cannot touch itself. The tip of my finger can touch my nose, can touch my tip of my tongue. It can touch the tip of other fingers, but it can't touch itself, right? Can it? Can the tip of your finger touch itself? Yeah. Sean is trying to do it. He's not succeeding. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Refuting reflexive awareness. That's another way of translating self-knower. Reflexive, what does that mean? Reflexive. We don't have our expert in language, Diana, with us. So what does reflexive mean usually? Anyone know?
Apply to oneself, reflexive. It applies to yourself or applies to itself.
Yeah, let's see. I was trying to look in the dictionary. Reflexive, denoting a pronoun that refers back to the subject of the clause in which it is used, or in logic, reflexive means of a relation always holding between a term and itself. Third, a method or theory of the social sciences, not that. Fourth, of an action performed as a reflex without conscious thought. So it's not meaning a reflex, but it's something that's referring back to itself. So that's what we say, self-knower, refuting self-knowers as the proof of dependent nature. So that would be the Chittamatra tries to prove dependent nature by the existence of self-knowers. Then second outline, how the Chittamatra standpoint falls short on both levels of the two truths. Third, how it is logical to follow Nagarjuna alone. And fourth, how negating dependent nature is not similar to rejecting worldly convention. So how when you negate that other powered phenomena, dependent phenomena, conventional phenomena, when you negate them as being inherently existent, you are not rejecting worldly conventions. You know, if you refute that they are being inherently existent, they can still exist conventionally. That's the meaning of that. So then the first of those, of course, has four outlines. So the refuting reflexive awareness is a proof of dependent origination, not dependent origination, dependent nature or other power phenomena. That has four parts. First, asking for the proof of dependent nature and showing it as unsound. So I prefer Venerable Jones' translation here. Let's see, where are we? Get to the right page. Does anyone see the? Oh, yeah, we go. She translates that through questioning the proof of other powered phenomena, indicating that self-cognizers are inadmissible. So through questioning that, the proof of dependent nature and showing how it is unsound or how it is inadmissible. Second, rejecting the opponent's response that reflexive awareness, self-knowers, are indeed acceptable, tenable. So once we try to prove that it's unsound, the Chittamatra wants to say that they're still good. Then third, demonstrating through other arguments how reflexive awareness remains untenable. And fourth, stating that intrinsically existent dependent nature is akin to the son of a barren woman, or if Venerable Jones says, indicating that inherently existent other powered phenomena are like the son of a barren woman. Okay, we're following? Okay, so so those of you with really great memories, you have to remember the first, the second, the third. So the first of those, here it says, asking for the proof or questioning the proof of other powered phenomena, as Venerable Jones says, showing how it is unsound or showing how it is inadmissible. So let's just read that, and this is where we're going to be starting after Christmas. Reading Thupten Jinpa's translation. Having demonstrated how consciousness without external reality is impossible, we did it many different, Prasangika did it many different ways, through logic and through scripture. The following refutes intrinsic existence of the entity, dependent nature, or other powered phenomena itself, without qualifying it in terms of absence of external reality. Does that make sense? So we're not combining the two. We're now just refuting other powered phenomena as being inherently existent. So the verse in question here is 672, and apparently the first line is 673. So it says, now if this entity, dependent nature, or other powered phenomena, other powered phenomena. Now, if this entity, dependent nature, other powered phenomena, free of duality and devoid of object and subject exists, the way you Chittamatra think, by what means is its existence known? So what is being asked there? What is being known? Is it the dependent nature or the emptiness of dependent nature, according to Chittamatra? Okay, we'll see. There, note 604 there. What does that say? Thupten Jinpa says, the root text embedded in Chandrakirti's commentary reads this as, by what means do you know that it exists? Okay, you can check on that. Without observing it, you cannot say it exists. Okay, that's verse 672. And then the first line of 673, cognition that is aware of itself is not established. So just read a little of the commentary, priming the pump for next time. If as you Chittamatra assert, oops, don't scratch. If as you Chittamatra assert, this entity, dependent nature, other power phenomena, which is free of duality, right? The Chittamatra asserts that the objects, let's say, are free of duality. They're not separate from the mind and is devoid of external reality as an object and devoid of a subject that is distant from such object.
Distinct.
Excuse me?
It's distinct.
Distinct. I'm sorry. I said distant, right? Distinct from such object. Thank you. If you say that that exists, we will then ask, by what means of knowing is the existence of this dependent nature known? How do you know that? So the Chittamatras say that you know the knowing by the self-knower that knows that knows the mental consciousness. And then let me see, the next paragraph says, to assert that one and the same cognition apprehends itself would be untenable. This is the Prasangika position. For it would be a contradiction to speak of something acting upon itself. Here are some analogies, and these are famous analogies. Say, for instance, the analogy of the sword that's being mentioned first is mentioned in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, right? Like when I said the tip of the finger can't touch itself. It can touch other things, it can touch other tips of fingers, but you can't touch it with itself. Also, the blade of a sword cannot cut itself. So the blade of a sword can cut the wood or the enemy's neck or their arm. It can cut other swords. It can hit other swords. Maybe if those swords are weaker, it can cut through them. But can it cut itself? However you wield the sword, it can't cut itself. The blade of a sword cannot cut itself. The tip of one's nail cannot touch itself. No matter how expertly trained and flexible, an acrobat cannot sit astride their own shoulders. I don't know, maybe someone in yoga who does hatha yoga can sit. So an acrobat can get on another person's shoulders, right? Or you can put your kid up on your shoulders or some other child, right? Or someone lighter than yourself you can carry around on your shoulders. Can you carry yourself on your shoulders? Okay. Fire does not burn itself. Would you accept that? Fire burns fuel, right? But does fire burn itself? Does it incinerate itself? If it did, then the fire would be extinguished by itself, right? It would be exhausted by itself. It would be used up by burning itself. That's not the case. And the final example, the eyes do not look at themselves. The eyes look at something other. They can look at other eyes, but the eye can't look at itself directly. It can look at itself in a mirror. That's not counted here, but it can't look at itself. Lama Tsongkhapa says, I will later discuss a unique explanation according to another source as to why cognition cannot apprehend itself. And that note seems to say that this is referring to the next paragraph. According to the opponent, cognition cannot be perceived by a separate cognition that is essentially distinct from it. For this would contradict their own Chittamatra tenet. So the opponent here is the Chittamatra. That means, okay, this is getting into more detail. So that's where we're going to begin next time. After, remind you again, tomorrow is Lama Tsongkhapa Day. It's the 25th of the Tibetan month, so it is also the offering of Sok, Dakini Sok, or Gana Chakra. So we're going to do the Guru Puja sponsored by Shantideva Center. What time is it, Snehi? What time is the? Yeah, yeah, you're muted, but Sean has put up 5 fingers or 4 fingers. I'm not sure. I can't tell if his thumb. Okay, yeah, okay, 4 o'clock. Supposedly about 2 hours. Jennifer was asking if we would go over. We might go a little bit over that, but yeah. So we'll offer the Guru Puja and Sog, and in honor of Lama Tsongkhapa, and recite the Lama Tsongkhapa mantra, and we'll talk a little bit about the greatness of Lama Tsongkhapa at that time. Okay, so before we end, there might be some really big questions you have from today. What do you think? Anyone has something that they need to get off their chest? Yeah, Nadine, yeah.
Thank you. Did you really say consciousness is impossible without external reality? And if so, is this in general so?
Say that again. Where did that statement come?
I thought I heard that when you read from the text just 5 minutes ago. Consciousness is impossible without external reality.
Okay, let's see. Where is that? What phrase is that? Does anyone see that exact sentence? Having demonstrated how consciousness without external reality is impossible. Is that what you're talking about? Consciousness without
Yes.
external reality is impossible.
And is this in general so?
Yeah, yeah. That's the Prasangika point of view, right?
That's quite shocking, quite amazing.
Unless there is external reality, there can't be a consciousness of that external reality. The Chittamatra would like to say you can have a consciousness of what appears to be external, even though there's no external reality. But if there's no external reality, you can't have a consciousness of that. That's what we've previously proved. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So let's dedicate the collections of merit and wisdom, the virtues that we've created. Louise is going to put up the prayers, but you know the dedication prayers, but it's good to have it up there. There we go. Gewadi nyuru tak Lama Sangye Drum Yurne Droa Chikyang Malupa De Sala Kuparsho Changchub Semchog Rimboche Make Panam Kegyurchik Kewanyampa Mepayang Gone Gongdu Pelbarsho. And then the next prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. He has returned, but to see his face, peerless teacher, Buddha, assembly of bodhisattvas, children of the conquerors, you Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, conqueror Losang. We refer to Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, as the second conqueror or victorious one, who was the spiritual father to your sons, Kedrupche and Gyaltsabche, together with your lineage lamas, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow upon us now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you Lama Zopa wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, I make this request. sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings, mother migrators, you suddenly departed to peace, at which point I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem, we're calling on the power of the truth, and of the undeceiving truth of the great waves of bodhicitta, of the bodhisattvas, the mind generation of the children of the victorious ones. By those truths, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. Finally, for all of our gurus, the Dalai Lamas, the Yangtze Rinpoches, the Jado Rinpoches, the Yangtze Rinpoches, the Lama Zopa Rinpoches, all of them, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures. You opened my eye to be able to understand them. Supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging mercifully with skillful means, illuminating spiritual friends. I make this request. I request you to please live long and stable lives. Okay. So, yeah. So I think in an hour and a half, I have a Dharma hour with KT and Nadine today. And then tomorrow we have the Lama Tsong Khapa Puja. So if you can attend, that would be good. Encourage other members who are not here, even they haven't been around, maybe Stephen and Venerable Shanka. I'm going to nudge Venerable Shanka. I think he's in France right now. He sent some photos after having done the retreat in Europe there, in England, I think. So I'm going to ask him to come. So I hope to see you tomorrow. Take care. And at any rate, we will see you January 3rd, right? Is that right? Okay. So take care.
Thank you.